This week, X-Men 97 Season 2 got a very interesting update. If you're familiar with the X-Men comics, this is something you've been thinking about for a while, and if you're not, this is something that you should be thinking about. So Brad Winterbaum, the executive producer from 97, was asked what other X teams could be featured in a new season. And he said, there's many teams in Marvel that have the letter X that are followed by a hyphen. I would put it to you like this. There's 2 other X teams in Season 2. Now, I am a humongous fan of the X-Men, and specifically one of those other X teams. And I want to take a video, just go through a bunch of the teams that I think this could be. I'll talk about likelihood, some of them based on like continuity, which characters we've already seen, but mostly I just want to talk about like which ones I think kind of fit the era, because we got one very important bit of information from D23 about X-Men 97 Season 2, and it is that in that season, the X-Men, at least some of them, will be dressed in the Grant Morrison, Frank Quitely era X-Men costume, which for people that aren't familiar, black leather jacket, big yellow X. It's a very standardized costume. It's kind of what Dark Phoenix was, although I wouldn't say that nailed the fabric the right way. So that's leather jacket era. I'm going to talk about some comic teams. These are pretty much all the X-Men comic teams I can think of, or the ones at least that would make sense here. I think it's going to be, it seems like, because X-Men 97 was very much taking stories from the late 90s and that era and adapting them. Seems like what we're doing in Season 2 because of those costumes, because those books came out in 2001, so it seems like maybe this is going to be the 2001, plus era. Like, I think they'll probably, I don't know, will they call it X-Men 97 Season 2, or will they just call it X-Men 2000? Because I could do that. Either way, where was I going with this? Right, I'm going to talk to you about some teams. I'll go with the most obvious ones, but then there's some other ones that aren't as obvious, and then some that I think kind of will blend together. And I do want to start with the ones that are X-blank, because that is how Brad Winterbaum framed this, although I think there's other teams that aren't exactly that would fit, and I think might be very likely. If you want to play this as safe as possible and just like what X teams fit that bill, it's X Factor and X Force. Let's start with X Factor. X Factor, I would say this is as close as we have to like a safe-ish bet. Then spoilers for X-Men 97 Season 1. Forge is trying to recreate the X-Men. He has like the B team. He even has all pictures up of characters he could bring on to the X-Men. He knows X Factor. He'd worked with X Factor in the past. We have a little picture of them. Strong Guy was in this season. Multiple Man was in this season. We know Quicksilver exists in this universe. We saw a little bit of Polaris in this universe. We haven't seen, the only character that we didn't actually see like in motion is Wolfsbane, but I'm fine with that. X Factor is a couple of things. Originally, the X-Men wanted a team of mutant hunters who were not hunting mutants. They were actually trying to save mutants. So what they did is the original First Class 5, Iceman, Angel, Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Beast, pretended to be like mutant hunters, and this group was called X Factor. This was kind of an excuse to bring back this original team in their own book. After that, though, I would say the book became what it more or less is for the rest of its run, which is a team led by, B-listers, I would say, if we're being generous for some of these guys. And they usually solve smallish mutant problems that maybe the X-Men wouldn't do on their own. Sometimes it's because they work for the government, so they occupy a different space than the rest of the X-Men. This version of the team, Havoc, who obviously we've seen in the past, we've seen this version of X Factor in X-Men the Animated Series, like they fully exist. But in the 2000s, after M-Day and the mutants all got depowered, Multiple Man, who was on that original team, took his friend Strong Guy and his friend Wolfsbane from that original team. Havoc and Polaris, I can't remember where they were, but they were doing their own thing and nobody liked Quicksilver, so why would you invite him? They started a detective agency with a couple of other mutants that were either like looking for a spot because they were on another team in the past, or characters who had been depowered that needed something to do. That was Richter, the main players on that team. Multiple Man, Strong Guy, Wolfsbane, Polaris and Havoc show up, but then you've also got Siren, M, Monet, whatever you want to call her, Penance, if you're being very specific, although I feel like Monet is probably what you would call that character. A kid/adult named Lila Miller, who's kind of confusing, and then a couple people from the Mojo world, Shatterstar and Longshot for some time are on that team. Darwin, I think, eventually shows up in those books, I can't remember, but they exist as a detective agency to solve small mutant problems. So like, kind of like Jessica Jones, you would call them and be like, hey, X Factor, my son who's a mutant is missing, we can't find him. This is my favorite run of comics. Like, I love this X Factor run, X Factor Investigations. I think you could do something like, I think this makes more sense than the X-Men working for the government, like the version led by Havoc and Polaris, because that team existed. Those were people that Forge knew, and like that team happened before, but they're not still doing that because Forge is not still doing that. So the next logical step for all of those characters is to put them on this team. I would say the one problem here, maybe a couple problems, I don't know where the Mojoverse characters are, so you'd have to account for them. I mean, we've definitely seen Longshot in the show. I assume we've also seen Shatterstar. And then Siren, maybe we've seen, but I honestly can't remember. In the original shows I'm talking about. And then Monet, I'm almost positive we have not seen. So for this to work, you might have to establish some characters, but you could also do a junior version of this where it's Madrick, Strong Guy, and Wolfsbane, and then maybe some other characters. And maybe you do Havoc and Polaris, pull them in here. I think that could totally work. I like them. I think they should do this. Like, there's other teams that I think make sense and there's a space for, but these, it's like, we already know one of them very well. Everybody that he knows that's an X-Men is gone, so like he's gonna need fill-ins. Why wouldn't he call his friends? The other team that I think is very possible is X-Force. So X-Force has been a couple of things. I would say the most succinct explanation for what they are, because originally they were kind of a spin-off of the New Mutants. It was a team led by Cable, who did cool guy, 90s Rob Liefeld big pouches stuff. And obviously we've had plenty of Cable in X-Men 97, because I would say the best run of X-Force, and to be fair, I have not read all of the original X-Force, but the version of X-Force that I love is the Fraction X-Force. This roster changes a little bit, but Angel, Wolverine, Psylocke, Phantom X, Deadpool, characters like that are a sanctioned team, like that works under, like Scott tells them what to do, but they do Black Ops missions. So like Scott's like, listen, this person needs to die. I can't kill him because I'm a public figure representing mutant rights. Can you and your like Black Ops hit squad go do it? They have the gray uniforms. It's where a lot of that is from. I think this team, okay, kind of makes sense because we have some characters from that. And there's other characters from X-Force, like other runs that have not shown up in 97 and were maybe in the original series, but not a lot. Characters like Cannonball, I think, had one appearance. Domino, Shatterstar was there. Feral, I cannot imagine Feral has more than a cameo. Then we know Angel, we've done the Archangel story in 97, so it would make total sense for him to come back. Psylocke has happened. In fact, Psylocke and Angel had a lot of interactions together. We have a Wolverine. Didn't do any Deadpool stuff, and I think, obviously there's time for that. I also don't think this team needs Deadpool. You could take one of the other, cooler mutants. I do think Nightcrawler was on this team for a time, so you could put him there. Bishop would fit this team nicely. Even Forge, I think, would fit the X-Factor team. They have storylines with Apocalypse, so right off the bat, it's like we already have an Apocalypse tease. We have 2 Apocalypse teases in the finale, so that would make sense. I think this team is possible, but not a guarantee. I think the reason this team is on so many people's lists is because A, Cable was a big part of last season, but B, maybe more importantly, when you think of X teams that are X-blank, they're like number 2, even higher than X-Factor, because X-Force is just more, like X-Force was mentioned in Deadpool 2, and like not even mentioned, it was like a thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the teams that shows up, but honestly for me, they've never been a team I'm in love with, and I think there's other more interesting things you could do with characters around this time, because they feel like a 90s thing, and X-Force has existed in a lot of different incarnations, like the Brewbreaker run I think was like the 2010s. So we're looking for an X-Men story set in the 2000s. What teams do we put on it? I wouldn't say X-Factor, at least to me, feels like an essential part of that team. I'm sure there are good X-Factor stories. This is when Bishop is doing a lot of exciting things that I'm not a humongous fan of, but like there's storylines that are happening now. But I would say the big one that happens in the 2000s, and these there's a few. There's all the John Sublime stuff, everything that's going on with Cassandra Nova, even though we've already kind of done some of the Cassandra Nova stuff last season. There's Avengers Assembled, House of M, Depowered X-Men. I think that's actually a very reasonable way for this to go, is a Depowered X-Men story. But okay, other teams that start with X. So we got Exterminators. I'm not even going to try to explain the original version. The one that everybody likes is from the, I think, Leah Williams comic from a couple of years ago, where it's just some of the X-women going and having a messy adventure. I think that book is great. I wish there was more stuff like that in comics. And honestly, that's part of what I like about X Factor so much. The X Factor Investigations is it's also like, silly nonsense. People going on dates, like low stakes stuff, but also fun. And I don't know. Just like there's something about the X-Men where like the weight of the world is on their shoulders, so they can't just kick back and relax. Like, yes, they can have a pool party day, but at the end of the day, like everything they do is so important. I do like that X Factor. It's like, I don't know, I hope this works out, but if it doesn't, it'll really only mess up their lives. All right, other X teams. I'm going to save one because I like them. Let's talk about the kids. There are 3 high-profile child X-Men teams that exist somewhere between the 80s and 2010s. And honestly, I can't think if there have even been more. I guess one of the teams got kind of rebooted, but basically, you have the New Mutants. It's pretty much the characters from the movie, but basically, it's the first team of child mutants. Sunspot, obviously big player. Cannonball, been in X-Men, the animated series. Mirage and Karma, I believe, were both, at least in the finale, briefly. Wolfsbane, member of that team, was on X Factor, so she totally happened. And then Magic, in the costume that Morph decides to change into as Magic. Like, that's what Magic looks like when she's on the New Mutants. And I think Warlock happens in season 3 of X-Men, the animated series. So what I'm saying is, I think New Mutants has passed. This X-Men seems to take place in a universe where the New Mutants happened and then they're over. And like the X-Men, had a recruitment thing where they got some, brothers and sisters and stuff. And now they've all gone their separate ways. Okay, so that's team 1. Team 2, the one that came a little bit later, Generation X. This feels like the most likely option for a couple of reasons. 1, most of the members of Generation X, from what I understand, have not shown up in X-Men 97 or X-Men the Animated Series. Like even Husk, like maybe in the Cannonball episode we saw another Guthrie, but basically it's Jubilee, who is a main character of the show, who has nowhere to go. Like this would be a great place for her. Monet, this is where Monet gets introduced in a way that is very complicated, but we can streamline that. Skin, Mondo, Sync is definitely on this team originally. I'll say that's it. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, probably someone important. The important thing about Generation X, though, is this is a team led by Banshee, who may be dead. I honestly don't remember. He got exploded in the big fight on Genosha, but maybe he didn't die. Maybe he just got thrown. And then Emma Frost. Now, this is before she became a good guy. She was on the road to being a good guy, but this is before she got turned into diamonds on Genosha. This is when she was just like starting a Massachusetts team, and she had a bunch of mutants who were kind of left over and was going to take them and do adventures. Now, we have a lot of pieces in motion here, and we have other characters that I think maybe could be put here, right? Sunspot could join this team, and we could do his New Mutants stuff here. We could keep Emma Frost and then maybe put another character, let's say Banshee is dead, say like Beast can be in charge of this, and this is the new kind of shot at the New Mutants. Now, the one problem here is it's not X Generation, it's Generation X, so it's like technically that's not exactly what Brad Winterbaum said, but also he could have been speaking, pretty generally, because I think a kid team is a lock. Like I think we're getting a team of children, and like this is the right time to introduce them. We got Jubilee, we got Sunspot, who could easily fit right in, and we have Emma Frost. I think this is this one feels right to me. Like if I had to bet on the 2 that I think we should do, X Factor, some other team of adults, and then Generation X. Now, the other team that it could be of children is Academy X. So Academy X came in the 2004, 2005 timeframe. This is after Generation X, and this is after mutants are depowered. So this is they kind of got all the rest of the young mutants together in the mansion, and we're like, we're keeping you guys. All right, you guys are important. And some of them got depowered and just had to go home because they weren't X-Men anymore. But this is a story that involves a lot of characters people are pretty familiar with. Some we have seen on the show. So like Pixie is the big one. I believe we see Pixie on Genosha. But then there's other characters like Glob Herman could kind of fit into this era, even though Glob Herman is part of the X-Men of this era, the same way that Quentin Quire was on the X-Men at this time. We're like, not quite on Academy X, but would fit right in there. Characters that are kind of fan favorites. You got Mercury, you got Surge, Armor, not necessarily introduced here, joins around this time. Hellion, who's great. There's so many Academy X characters. I really do think there's a lot of people who just love the Academy X characters. And I think like reading this story as an adult, I really dug it. So I bet if I was a kid reading a story about these kids who were the same age as me, absolutely. Ooh, another Academy X person, Dust, who was totally in last season. And I believe was even on the board of people that Forge was thinking about recruiting. So like, that's a solid bet. Do we mash all three of these things together and just call it Academy X? Because I do think Academy X as a team name makes more sense than Generation X or New Mutants in universe, and make this a team led by M. Frost, who is also leading it at that point, and like a couple of other characters, maybe Beast, maybe we bring Mirage back, maybe we bring some other New Mutants that could have had a history, maybe like Ilyana comes back, that could be fun. I do think if we get a version of these teams, it'll be the Academy X version. I'm really curious to see what they do here, because the X-Men have always been rotating in new kids, because then there was also another incarnation of Generation X, like Nature Girl and some of those characters. So it's like, it's a very fluid roster, but you could take the characters that people like and make just this super team of, you know, Sunspot from New Mutants, Jubilee and Monet, and maybe Skin and Sync from Generation X, and then Surge and Mercury and Hellion from Academy X, and then smush that together, make that Academy X. I think that's totally doable. So I would say, as far as likelihood goes, I think that if it's not just X Factor and X Force, that's the next one that I think is likely. Some X children, probably Academy X. Is just what it would be called. All right, then we got Exiles. Exiles is a story that is kind of Doctor Who. It's, you know, Loki, basically. A team of usually mutants, although not exclusively, brought together by a mysterious guy to fix things in time. They have a couple of members that are, you know, mainstays on the team. The big ones are Nocturne, Blink, and then Morph. So this is what Morph is mostly known from, and specifically the design of Morph that made it into X-Men 97, the white face. So like, Morph, I would say, is a popular-ish character, and I don't think season 1 really gave Morph a lot to do. The problem with Exiles is just like, it is hard to weave that naturally into another plot. Like, you could just have him show up and like have one Exiles mission, but I think I would rather the Exiles just be their own show, honestly. They're the one that I think spins off the easiest. But I don't think we're getting the Exiles. That just doesn't feel right to me. Good books though. Very good books. Next one, Excalibur. So this team, even though it could read as that, is EXCALIBUR. It's not X hyphen. This is the team of British mutants. So one character we've already seen, and I guess another character who we kind of saw, but mostly Nightcrawler is the character that matters here. Captain Britain, Megan, Shadowcat, and Rachel. That's your big five. Like a lot of these other characters have rotated in. There was a second generation, third generation, I think. But if you're talking about Excalibur, like that's the team. Problems with this team are pretty obvious. So we have Nightcrawler. Everybody loves Nightcrawler. Giving him something to do is good. But we can just put him on X-Force if we want. We don't have a Kitty Pryde, and I don't think that's like one of the main characters who existed at the time X-Men 97 was happening that just did not make it into any storylines in like the animated series or 97. I think it probably has something to do with that Pride of the X-Men show that she was going to be on not happening. But she was interesting in Excalibur because she was already a part of the X-Men and then had to find something new to do. Rachel's has similar problems where she's, you know, from a different timeline and stuff. I think we did kind of see her in some flashback or something. But then obviously she probably is, like, unless they're changing it, Ascani, the character who raised Cable. So we did meet her. But then I don't think we have Captain Britain or Megan yet. I don't think. Excalibur seems like a long shot. It could happen, but I don't see the point. Besides just, like, I like those characters, but I don't think they fit into stuff that's already been set up. Okay, so we did X Factor, X Force, Academy X, Generation X, New Mutants, Exiles, we talked about Exterminators, and the one we just said that I've already forgotten what the word was, Excalibur. The only other team that comes to mind, and especially based on this timeline, is a team that I think is quite fun, that I think would actually be pretty interesting here. named the X-Statix. So first, right off the bat, these guys tried to become X-Force. They tried to go like, well, nobody's X-Force, right? We'll be X-Force. And X-Force is like, we're X-Force, but also, who are you even? So this was an attempt by a producer to create an X-Men reality show that was basically the real world. I don't think any of these characters were X-Men. Maybe Mr. Sensitive had connections with the X-Men, and I honestly couldn't even tell you what Dupe's like story is, but for the most part, these were new characters that were all like regular X-Men, but they all kind of stunk because they were, you know, like fame obsessed, bad leaders. They were really abrasive. They were, you know, alcoholics or whatever. They had good powers, but like at the end of the day, you figure the X-Men just wouldn't take these guys. But they also didn't want to be X-Men as much as they wanted to be like pro athletes. This book is really funny. It's super messy. I think the characters are very memorable. They're very unique. None of them, besides Dupe, and a couple, well, none of them's not fair. Some of them made it into other stuff, but this is a one and done kind of thing, even though they just resurrected this team. But I think if we're setting this series in the 2000s, X-Statix is a great team to have created as like this is the other thing that's happening. Like this is the X-Men are doing their thing, and one episode they just bump into the X-Statix who are trying to film their reality show, and they're getting everybody killed. You know, they learn a lesson about being good heroes, and that's all we need. I think that wouldn't be crazy. I actually think that would be great. Also, they are one of the few that have an X in their name, like X-Statix. So if Brad Winterbottom was being completely like saying it's going to be a team with X hyphen, that's X Factor, X Force, and then I can't even X Corps, maybe the X Company, but there's not that many. So I think if that's what we're doing, X-Statix is like the third one on that list. If I get to pick one that I think deserved a vote, it would probably be X-Statix, because I think X Factor is a safe bet. I love X Factor, strong guy, Monet behind me here. But you can't really see Monet, can you? Because Agatha's there. But Monet and strong guy are together here. But like, I think that's a done deal. But I think getting X-Statix in the show would be really cool because they were so of the 2000s. All right, so I'll say two more from just looking at some lists, because there's other teams that, like, you know, the Marauders or the Morlocks that, like, I think just exist in that show already. We can't do them. There's also the X-Patriots, and this is Strong Guy and the rest of the characters from X Factor doing their own thing after X Factor Volume 2. You know, I don't think this is really important. I think we need to do X Factor first, and I think if we're taking those characters in any direction here, it would be in the X Factor Investigations direction, but you know, that is an option. The other one that I didn't think of, mostly because I'm pretty sure they've already done this, is like Weapon X. I'm not positive Weapon X has been on X-Men 97 or the animated series, but like I have a hard time believing that they haven't at least covered some of Wolverine's origin. I know there was an episode with like Maverick, and yeah, they already did Alpha Flight, so that wouldn't make sense. So yeah, in conclusion, these are the X teams that I think they will pick. In the order of how much I like them, it is X Factor Investigations, Academy X, and then X-Statix, and then X-Force. In the order of which ones I think are the most likely, X Factor, X-Force, Academy X, or some kid team. And then honestly, maybe they do Weapon X again. But there's other teams, you know, there's like the book NYX, there's other X books, but I just don't think there's any space for other teams like that. That's my guess. Safe money's on the X-Force and X Factor, but I think it could be fun if they did X-Statix. And I also think they need to do something with these kids because they have a lot of kid characters. Emma Frost went through her transformation. Like, have her and Beast lead a team, have them like hook up, because we can't do the Emma Frost and Scott thing where he cheats on her psychically and Jean goes into his mind and is like, oh my god, again? What about last time? Like, I think because we did that with Madeline Pryor, we have to kind of shift that story. And I think there's like nice sexual chemistry between Emma Frost and Banshee in Generation X. I don't think it'd be crazy to sub in Banshee for Beast and like give Beast something to do on this show. The other thing you could do is you could do Wolverine, but I don't know. She probably wouldn't get along with Wolverine as well. So those are my thoughts. I want you to tell me in the comments for your two things. First one, which one you want and who you think will be. Second, which team I forgot. because I couldn't find a great list of all of them. This is just me going from memory. You know, X books, and especially team names that come up once or twice, like that have been in multiple volumes, they tend to be the ones that stick. But if you can think of another X team that you think would make sense in X-Men 97, you know, absolutely put them in the comments. And speaking of cool teams, if you want to take a look at another awesome team, I'd recommend checking out this video's sponsor, Nebula. That's right, because my other channel, Nando V Movies, has been on Nebula for a while, but now you can watch all my Nando Cut videos on Nebula also. They go up ad-free, so you can skip all the sponsor reads like this, and my Marvel Snap character videos go up 1 week early. So if you want to impress your friends by already knowing who Aranya or Madam Web are in the comics, you go on Nebula, you get an early look at all those videos. But that's not all Nebula is about, because it is, like I said, a great team. And I've been lucky because I've been part of Nebula for a long time, like since the beginning. But in the time between then and now, a lot of other creators have come to Nebula. And sometimes it's creators I'm not familiar with who are making cool stuff, but sometimes it's creators whose videos I'm already watching, and then it's like, oh, Climate Town's on Nebula? Awesome, I love their stuff. So we're adding new creators all the time, and we make Nebula original projects, so this could be plays, short films, closer to feature-length films, and we're working our way up to that, series, things like that. All of that is in the works. We've got our travel game shows, Jet Lag and The Getaway. Those go up on Nebula, and there's so much other cool stuff that we're working on. Some of it you may have heard about already, but a lot of it is going on behind the scenes. I'm very excited for you guys to see everything. Now, a yearly subscription to Nebula is usually $50 a year, which is still a great deal. But if you use the code TheNandoCut at checkout, you can get a year of Nebula for just under $2.50 a month. It's a great deal. Go to go.nebula.tv/TheNandoCut. Check it out, see which creators are there, download the app, play around with that. It's a really well designed app that we're constantly changing. We have different categories now, so I'm in the culture category because the X-Men are culture. I hope you enjoy it. That's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.